Welcome back to Fast Market on the TD Ameritrade. I'm Tom White. I'm joined by my co-host Nick Theodorakis, but let's bring in our next guest for our hashtag segment, and that's going to be Megan Brantley, the Vice President of Research at LikeFolio. Welcome to the show, Megan.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, we're talking Lululemon. Shares are down about 11% so far this year, off nearly 30% from those all-time highs we saw last November. It seems like consumer sentiment data is getting hit. It would see in some softness as the Omicron variant was pretty rampant in January. We saw the overall market get hit, and maybe that's causing Lululemon. What kind of data are you guys seeing into this report? Because it seems like the way that people are dressing has changed over the last couple of years since the pandemic started, but they've also got some new products coming online here too. So what's your data showing us today?
Yeah, so you guys really had to twist my arm to talk about Lululemon today. I was really thrilled whenever I saw that was the topic. Right. But what's really interesting when we look at a company like Lulu is you're right. They did benefit as really dress codes kind of loosened up over the pandemic. You know, people were buying clothes to work from home instead of clothes to work in. And so now things are kind of shifting. But what's interesting is that somehow Lululemon is now harnessing a whole different set of trends. So when we look at mentions of people who are talking about, going to a group fitness class or joining a gym, those mentions are up by double digits year over year. So, whenever you're re-entering this public workout sphere, you need nice workout clothes now. All of a sudden, you care what you're wearing to the gym versus what you were wearing when you were working out in your basement. So it's interesting to start to see Lulu, harness some of that momentum as well. And I think this chart is really interesting because, we always talk about how are these companies performing versus peers. And, we included, Nike, Gap due to their Athleta brand, and then Under Armour just to give some perspective. And what you can see is that Lulu, at least from a demand perspective, that's that x-axis, it's gaining the most momentum versus its peers. I think that another interesting note that I want to call out is you'll see that, this is something that we've talked about, that Nike has been doing a really good job lately in terms of consumer happiness. And actually, we see Nike higher than Lulu. But what's fascinating is that the reason that Lulu has kind of, lost a couple of those happiness points, especially recently, is due to this new product launch that you kind of hinted at, these new tennis shoes or running shoes that they launched that are sold out and people can't get their hands on them. So we have sold out mentions just spiking and really kind of dragging on that sentiment. So it's a little bit of an interesting scenario for Lulu to be in, but I think that, it's a positive sign, at least for our data. We're seeing Lulu kind of reach this inflection point as consumers are returning to shopping in stores again. They're getting back in the gym, and they're really liking these new products that Lululemon is putting out.
It's a great analysis, Megan. I think it's so interesting to see, right, companies that figure out multiple revenue streams, right? They bought Mirror too, and you talk about Mirror, right? They've got at-home fitness. It's okay to wear their pants if you're a guy now into the office. You put on a different pair of their pants to go to the gym. It's pretty amazing. So it seems like people really enjoy the brand. That slippage you're talking about, though, in the happiness score. What are you looking to hear from them, with earnings, right around the corner? Right? What are you looking to hear from them in terms of guidance to kind of stem that? And do you think that if people hear the right thing from them, that ticks back up? Or do you think this is truly just supply and demand, and no product means not a pleased customer?
Whenever we look at the actual mentions of these tweets, because we're looking at what the consumers are talking about, the most common, cause of negative sentiment, at least recently, tend to be related to those sold out mentions. So people who are talking about they can't get their hands on the product that they wanted, or the color that they wanted, or the specific, type of short or pant that they wanted. And so I think that is kind of this lingering supply chain, maybe product shortage issue that they kind of hinted at. But what we see is that those purchase mentions on this chart, I think, is really cool because you're starting to see that inflection point. We saw some just loss in momentum whenever it came to, consumer demand and how enthused consumers were about shopping with Lulu over the last couple of quarters. And those 2 quarters that I have highlighted really shows a reversal. And now they're reporting on that Q4, so that second to last bar. And you can see definite improvement versus Q3. We would expect this into the holiday season. But then what's really interesting is they're continuing to build on this business in the current quarter. And just for reference, we're about 2 months in already on that, that first quarter of 2022. And so this is a really nice pace for Lululemon. I think that is currently measuring out about 19% higher on a year-over-year basis. And this is something, this is just a trend reversal. So for us, this is an interesting inflection point and tells us that if Lulu is able to, meet the consumer demand is certainly there and it's building.
Yeah, and Megan, and we know about the inflationary pressures, the supply chain issues, the raw materials that they're using for their products. Those prices are going up, right? It's already at an elevated price level point for a lot of people. But I kind of wanted to hit on the new phenomenon, the shoe, right? I know you're a runner. I've been wearing the same brand and model of running shoe for the last 15 years. I'm not going to change for that. But you guys are seeing positive mentions there. Now, we've seen shoe companies come and go trying to compete against Nike and Adidas, and they just kind of fall by the wayside eventually, and they don't get any traction. Is that what you expect? Is that what you expect here, or is this something that, because people are so brand loyal to Lululemon, they'll keep trying this out?
This is an instance where, I am a runner and I missed my chance to get my hands on these shoes. I'm like devastated. They're already sold out in my colors. They're sold out in my size across the board. I even would have gotten a color that I didn't like just to try these out, because just in the mentions that we're looking at, the reviews are extremely positive. People are talking about, if it's possible, these shoes feel like butter. They feel the same way that the Align leggings make me feel whenever I'm working out and when I'm wearing them. So I think that, you made a good point that a lot of other companies, one that comes to mind is Under Armour, that tried to get into shoes and they didn't really execute, right? They didn't do a good job. We saw mentions of people talking about wearing Under Armour shoes and it hurting their feet. This is not the case with Lululemon. The early mentions of people who were lucky enough to get their hands on these shoes are extremely positive. They talk about them being extremely comfortable. They talk about the material being high quality. And I think it's interesting because if you listen to comments from their, product team, they talk about that these shoes took 4 years to develop, that they did, I think, 1 million foot scans, and that when they were developing this, this is one of the first shoes that was actually developed based on, women and women's feet. A lot of time, shoe companies, they develop based around the man's foot and kind of adjust to fit women's sizing. And this was kind of a reverse because, Lulu knows their audience. And they also know that maybe if a woman picks up a pair of these shoes, they'll want to buy a pair for, her husband or her boyfriend or, her partner, whoever. And so I think that this is really interesting, but at least from our data perspective, it appears that this could be a little bit of a spark that maybe Lulu needed as they started to kind of lose some of that momentum to kind of, reinvigorate their consumer base and introduce a new product. And so far, the most negative things are just people talking about that they can't get their hands on the shoe, like me.
Yeah, and I think, you might want that Lululemon emblem on the side of your shoe. Because half the people here in Chicago that are wearing Lululemon never working out in that Lululemon outfit ever, but it's all about brand recognition and quality of products. So I like that angle that you used, that they did a lot of research before they actually came out with a product. But now going into earnings here, Megan, are you guys positive on the scores? Because it seems like the trend is kind of reversing the past couple quarters.
Yeah, I think that we're in the early moments of this kind of reversal and the spark for Lululemon. Our score is coming in bullish, slightly bullish. It's a 29. I think that for comparison, last week, whenever we talked about Nike was a 37. And part of that was just because of how much happier they're making their consumers. And, Lulu's consumers are already pretty happy. And so I think that from our perspective, we are definitely leaning bullish into this event, acknowledging that maybe in the quarter that they're reporting on, they're not going to have a lot of this, this new product energy to hit on. But, we do think that they will be able to make some nice nods toward guidance and potential sales moving forward.
Yeah, and you guys were spot on that Nike call, too, because that stock has rallied post-earnings and hitting highs post-earnings from where it was prior to that. All right, great stuff. As always, Megan, appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right, that's Megan Brantley, the Vice President of Research at LikeFolio.